Good day, everyone. Welcome to Milligenics. I am Sensei, and I'm here with my good friend,
Master Roshi.
Master Roshi. And as I promised in our last episode, we're going to talk about our two brains, and um, and that's what I like to call the imposter syndrome because it's like two spheres of our brain working not in harmony, but in a conflicting way with each other. So what the imposter syndrome is that we may feel as our efforts, our achievements, that we may have worked so hard for are due to luck and not through our own ability to learn quickly and adapt to our circumstances. Uh, it is unfortunate that our current situation and educational system has now dictated how our society how it undermines other forms of education, such as our wit, our adaptability, our emotional intelligence, and managing our emotions. Um, getting an education from an institution is fantastic, but getting people education, being out there with folks, learning how to fail, learning how to get back up, that's form of education too, and I think many of us are lacking that as well. So the imposter syndrome, I think it can be sort of like a psychological torture. Imagine being so smart and knowing that you're smart, but when it comes down to executing, you feel less than. So this is where your success is not mandated by your strengths, but solely on the expectation of others. Okay, you constantly thinking what others are thinking about you, um, and which is most likely only happening inside your head. The wonderful thing about humanity is that uh, everyone is lost, and not just you. Everyone is, including myself. I'm figuring things out too. And so the imposter syndrome may very well be possible to some unreachable goal of being perfect and not allowing our imperfection to be visible. Um, and that creates anxiety and fear that the world is going to find out that you just aren't good enough for the rest of us. And this negative way of viewing yourself can take a toll. It can affect your personal life, such as saying, I'm not good enough for her, I'm not good enough for him. And it can also affect your professional life because you might think that you're not good enough for that path, for that career, for that job, or for that new entrepreneur uh, journey that you want to take. So, I know I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not a psychotherapist for me to say that I'm an expert on this. I'm just giving you an observation that I have seen through myself and by others. And I think that sometimes it can perhaps be due to living in a comfortable and safe world, as most of us do now, considering that we live in a first world country. And I think that that could perhaps uh, be the reason why our increase of imposter syndrome has risen. Not taking chances or risk for fear of getting hurt when you were a kid, perhaps constantly keeping you safe. Okay, you scrape your knee, poor baby. As opposed to, it's okay to scrape your knee, keep playing. And this is what many times, our parents may have done to us in the best of good faith to protect us. But in the interim, something else happens. So, and you may see this now. We give children participatory trophies, uh, just for not winning, just because you showed up. And in real life, we know that's not the case. And when you start sensing that there might be a chance of you losing, it might keep you from moving forward because you've never lost before. So even losing is a lesson. It's something that you can take with you. Being disappointed is another lesson. These are all emotions that it's okay to have, and it's okay to process them, and it's okay to move forward with them. But when you don't know enough of these emotions, when we get older, we may not know how to deal with that kind of stress. So what I like to say is that too much of everything can be damaging, such as, too much work can be damaging. Um, too much relaxation as well, and just too much of everything. So now the positive side of our discussion is that this behavior sometimes can help you stay humble, keeps you grounded, and it offers you a window for you to change, to adapt new habits, and of course, only if you're willing to do so. Master Roshi, have you ever experienced, or have you ever perhaps seen this behavior in the past from anybody that you may know?
I would say that I've seen some of the characteristics of it. One of those being self-doubt. I've seen that in myself. I think everybody experiences a little bit of self-doubt. When it comes to the actual types, of these types of people, no pun intended. You've got the perfectionist, like you mentioned, Sensei. You've got the superhero. You've got the expert. You got the natural genius, and then you've got the soloist. So you've got about five different types of people where the imposter syndrome are identified in. I see this pretty common in the perfectionist and the superhero in working in my career. I've come across those types of people. Um, and no matter what they do, right, they just feel like it's still inadequate. They can be, or they can strive to be perfect, but no matter how perfect they try to be, it's still not enough. Um, and then you've got the person that's the superhero that wants to push themselves as hard as they can, um, and then they just still feel inadequate. Um, it's interesting that I've read some of the literature, Sensei, and it says that 70% of people have suffered an episode of the imposter syndrome. As far as myself, I think, we have to go back a little bit here and talk about the fact that, in our community, being a minority, coming from a Hispanic background, there's a lot of, I would say, things that people come across where they feel inadequate. Other people make them feel inadequate, that they don't belong where they're supposed to be. And sometimes that can be implied, right? Because, for example, you could be in a room with a lot of very smart people, and you yourself are smart, probably smarter than the next person that you're sitting to, but you still feel inadequate because maybe that's something that you've been told when you were growing up from a teacher, a peer, a parent, right? They praised you one moment, but then they were critical another, and that's one of the characteristics that causes people to exhibit this imposter syndrome, which again, in its definition, means that you feel like you don't belong there. You're not fulfilling that role that you're supposed to be. I think you've gone through some of these experiences, Sensei, that you've mentioned to me, and I hope you can share that today. Talking about the one time you said that when you were in school, you had a teacher that told you that maybe you weren't going to achieve as much as you could, and then also when you were working in the corporate sector, right? You said that you sort of experienced this, but in reverse. So I think it'll be good today to talk about some of those topics. I think you've had more experiences than this than I have, but I've definitely felt self-doubt. Even with all the education that I have, having a master's degree and all those. Sometimes you're in a room and you might have someone that went to an Ivy League, and that just puts you like in a position where you think you're just not qualified, you're not good enough because you didn't have that education. So we'll be talking about all those things today, and I'll bring it back to you, Sensei.
You know, yeah. So, there's nothing wrong with having an imposter moment, you know, but it is something else when you have an imposter syndrome. Everyone, like you said, you have experienced self doubts before, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. When it becomes abnormal, it's when it doesn't allow you to live an enriched and fulfilling life, especially with the untapped potential that you may have. So one of the ways that you can be aware of these things, okay? But better yet, one of the ways that you can combat this is by reframing your thoughts, okay? Remind yourself that the only difference, okay, uh, between someone that has the imposter syndrome and someone who doesn't is they will respond to the situation. But both of them are most likely equally smart and equally competent. It is how we respond to the situation. So people who don't feel like imposters are no more intelligent than anybody else. Um, so be aware that if you do have it, that it is a moment that for you to learn to push through, so you can gather enough confidence to allow yourself to grow. All right. Learn how to give yourself constructive criticism and follow through that loving authority that you're providing yourself with. Um, it can also be helpful if you tell your parents, if you tell someone you love about this feeling, so that way they can also help you see how they can help you push when you're exhibiting this behavior, and for them to say it's going to be okay. There's nothing besides rejection. No tiger is going to eat you. There's no cyber tooth. There's nothing out there that's really going to hurt you, especially in this remote environment. And I'm thinking that perhaps because of the environment that we're in now, Master Roshi, as time progresses, this imposter syndrome might actually grow, because now we're living a more sedentary life, and we're not moving as much as we were moving before. We're spending a lot more time alone, and when we may have to go out there and go back out into the world, it might very well become a little bit uh, more challenging. Uh, but yes, I remember when I was in school. Gosh, a long time ago. Uh, and I guess the level of how can I put it, racism. I guess you can say it was a little bit more open than it is now. And yes, I've had teachers telling me that just because I didn't know how to speak English, and I was in my learning curve, and because I was in my learning curve, they discriminated against me by saying things that were less than desirable. And when I went and when I had to speak English, at times it it made me ashamed, because I felt I wasn't good enough to speak English until eventually, I was able to push through and cross over that barrier, and I made up some wonderful friends, and I still am. So uh, that can also be one way that can affect. But it also has an opposite effect. All right, and the opposite effect is that I myself, I didn't go far in school. I went to school later as I got older. But when I was a boy, a kid, I didn't go past ninth grade. And I didn't get to go to college until I was about 30. And during that time period, I held corporate jobs. And I was an operations manager. I was a telecommunications manager. I was also facilities manager. So um, all those positions needed a certain level of education. And but what I did was is that once I went to this interview, once I was in my environment, what I did was I tried to learn as quickly as possible the job that I had to do, and I took consistent notes. I stayed late. I worked, or I started early, just so I can put the time and the effort to become a master at it, because I knew I was an imposter uh, until I guess I wasn't. So I think that it worked for me in the opposite direction in terms of, I guess, the old saying, fake it till you make it. And I literally became that. I faked it until I made it. And I think that has been in every role with me, including the role that I'm in now as a coach. The first time I coached a class, truthfully, I had experience as a manager. I had experience in leading people, yes, but never in a classroom environment. And but I said I could do it. I relied on my transferable skills. I relied on my past experience, and I said I could do it, and I pushed through. And now it's been quite some years, and uh, I love what I do now. And now I'm looking and doing this in another medium, so I can reach more folks with my kind of message. So, and hopefully continue to help more people. So one thing that you can do to help you is stop comparing yourself to others. Okay. I think this is a big no no. Okay. Because imagine how many people live in the US? I don't know. It must be billions of people. Uh, and imagine yourself comparing yourself to billions of people, or millions. Because everywhere you go, you're going to meet somebody that you might think is better than you. If you move to, I don't know, to the West Coast, uh, I'm sure you're going to meet people that you think are smarter than you. If you decide to move to Canada, I'm sure you're going to do the same thing. You move to South America, same thing. Move to China, same thing. Wherever you go, you're always going to feel inadequate if you continue to compare yourself to others. You will always find some fault in yourself, and that will continue to fuel your lack of belonging, your lack of confidence. So instead, what you need to do is focus on that little voice, okay, and stop the chatter and push yourself through and analyze yourself. Why am I being scared? Why do I feel I'm not good enough? And perhaps by asking yourself these questions, as opposed to just accepting that feeling, oh, I'm not good enough. Wow, I'm not good enough. No, stop. Analyze yourself. Why is it that you think you're not good enough? Is it because you don't have the experience? Okay, at one point or another, nobody has. Is it because you lack the expertise? You took the training, you went to school, you have wit, you have intelligence, you have drive. Rely on those transferable skills. So refuse to let yourself be held back by these feelings, no matter how much you feel like you don't belong. And don't let that stop you from pursuing your goals. So keep pushing, keep refueling yourself, and don't ever stop moving forward. It's almost like that. I don't know. It was a movie, a Rocky movie, that Rocky was talking to his son, and he just keeps saying, when you get knocked down, it wasn't about the fight. It wasn't about winning. It was about getting back, getting knocked down, and getting back up. Okay, so that's what this is. The moment this feeling knocks you down, gather your strength, gather your thoughts, and continue moving forward. At the end of the day, remember, you are here for a reason. Okay, if you're in an interview, you're there for a reason. If you're submitting a resume, you're there for a reason. If you're going to a business meeting, you're there for a reason, and that's the reason you need to focus on not those doubtful emotions that you may have. Remember that you are smarter than, than you think you are. You know more than you give your credit for, and remind yourself as often as you need to that you are where you need to be at that particular moment. So recognize this behavior, recognize it, put an end to it. Okay. Um, in the field that I work in, I prepare individuals to get back into the workplace, and I experiment this syndrome a lot, and it hurts me sometimes because I know that the person has all the qualifications. I know this person has all the expertise, the personality, the wit, everything, it's the full package. And yet, when it comes down to showing up to the interview, they don't show up. They ghost the employer. And they do this once and twice and three times. And it is at that moment that unfortunately I have to keep moving forward because I have others to help and I wish I can help everyone. And it breaks my heart knowing that this man or this woman who has the intelligence to move forward, unfortunately, with that doubtful frame of mind, they are in their potential. Um, so that happens many times when you have to go for a job interview. It might happen many times when you might have to go on the first date with somebody. It might happen when you have to take a test, even though you studied and you did everything right. The day of the test, um, you made yourself sick by I don't know by not feeling well. Sometimes we do that psychologically. We feel that we're not good enough. We're not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And then when the time comes, you put so much negativity into it that your body decided to get sick. So that way you can justify that the reason why you didn't go to where you needed to go, it was because you got sick. When in reality, it was your mental process and your thought and your patterns of your thoughts is what kept you from moving forward. So recognize the behavior, put an end to it, push through, realize that most folks have this behavior, just like what you said, Master Roshi, 70%. Okay? I'm part of that 70%. You're part of the 30%. Okay? Uh, so if you're like me and you've had it, recognize it and stop it. Stop being a perfectionist. Okay? You will never get it perfect. It's inevitable. People will always be better than you, and you will always be better than others. It's just the way it is. So don't think that you have to be a perfectionist, because if you think that you need to be a perfectionist or you need to be everything needs to be perfect, okay, you're gonna be waiting a long time, and life is gonna pass you by. Uh, be humble, of course, and kind to yourself, but also be critical, okay, and push through. Yes, be humble and kind. Yes, it's okay, Sensei. Um, but then after you say that, push through. And remember that all that chatter, most likely, is going inside your head. The person that you're talking to has their own unique chatter going inside their head. And the other person that you talk to also does. So everyone has a little bit of chatter inside their heads, and it's never the same. It's constantly overlapping each other. Um, Master Roshi, do you have anything else to add to this episode?
I would say that, going back to what you were saying about your students, and I remember when this used to happen to me because, we used to work right next to each other, literally. And I would have students just like you that we felt like they had the most potential to do the best at the interview, and then they just ended up being a letdown. And I think that hurts the most. I'm sure you feel that way compared to somebody that it's like you said with that example about Rocky, in a way where they fall down or you see them fall down a lot, but then they surprise you in the end that they come back and they end up getting the interview or the job compared to the top student in your class that you felt like, man, that'd be the person right away that when they graduate or when they come out of school that they're going to get the best job, and that doesn't happen. It really hurts. I just can sense that pain, every single time when I had a class and that happened. Um, but then after a while, you just start to realize that almost nothing can surprise you anymore. It's nice when it does, and that was just a great example that you used. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, this just seems to be a predominant sort of it's almost another pandemic in itself that people suffer from, time and time again, especially minority communities. We've been told for a long time that you are not capable enough, you're not smart enough, uh, and we work so hard. And then on the other side of the spectrum, when we actually finally make it, when we get to where we're supposed to be, and then we feel like, no, we're not supposed to be here. Is this real? Is this a prank? That I'm here. But to combat that, you gave a great list of examples that people can use. And I want to tie this into what we're going to do next week, which is about social media. So one of the things that when it comes to social media is you got to be careful not to overuse it too much. It becomes toxic. And what happens is when you use it too much, you start to feel inferior because, like you said, there's billions of people in the world, and you feel like you don't measure up to those people because you're going by what you see on the internet, and a lot of stuff is not real. Most of those people don't really have that money, don't really have those cars. They could just be taking a picture next to somebody's car. So it doesn't really match up with, and this is what a part of the imposter syndrome is, that you believe that you need to be better than those people, um, and then it doesn't match up. It's impossible to if you can have somebody that's really a billionaire, so to speak, and you try to be like that person. It might be impossible. You could never be that person. Um, so it only makes your feelings even worse than what it is, because like you said, you start to try to compare yourself to other people. Just stop it. Don't worry about everybody else. Worry about your own situation. Um, so that's what I would have to say. So we'll have a great conversation next time about the social media and how toxic it could be. But I think that's a great aspect of how that ties into our imposter syndrome, because that is um, one of the things that you have to be careful about, when you're trying to get better with overcoming this syndrome. And one of the things I read is that sometimes um, you can fight it, but you may never be able to win it. You can only try to contain it as best you can. Uh, so that's what I would have to say, Sensei.
No, and I agree. And before we part, before we end this episode, also you made a very good point. Um, because there are students, I had students that great people, but sometimes it's surprising that they even graduated, and yet they're the ones who get the best jobs, and the ones that I feel like they should be like the ones being successful the quickest, many times are the ones that lack and stay behind. And now I have individuals that hardly study, uh, never really put 100% effort. But when it came down to strapping on their boots and, and pushing through that uncomfortable feeling, they're doing great now. They broke through. Uh, they got into the position. They made mistakes. They learned. Many people learn by doing hands-on, by actually doing the movement, the repetition. And other people learn better in a classroom setting. So I guess that's probably the difference. The folks that were really smart in the classroom setting perhaps weren't adequate enough to go out and do the hands-on, and vice versa. So yeah, so Master Roshi, that was a great gateway to our next episode next week. We're gonna talk about social media and how to detox from social media. So stay tuned. And let me ask you this: are you a social media addict? Take care of yourself.